The only winning move is not to play. Alright, y'all, so today coming back with you with another movie review. This review is going to be talking about the 1983 film Wargames, which is directed by John Badham and famously stars Matthew Broderick. So, going into this movie, I heard a little bit about it. I mean, when you hear a lot about 80s movies, you hear typically the ones that most people know. And I heard a lot about this one, and it was something about hacking, and it starred Matthew Broderick, but I didn't really know too much else about it, so I decided to give it a chance. And to kind of give you my initial opinions about this movie, it's really solid. It is actually a really good movie. I wouldn't call it like the best movie ever. There are some things about it I just kind of think are a little bit dumb, but I also think it's a pretty damn solid movie. Obviously, it's a movie of its time. It deals with the Cold War and mutually assured destruction, but there's also a lot of topics about it too that are really dangerous and prevalent today, especially considering the rise of AI in society right now and how it's being used in so much stuff and really just the danger of that. So, kind of wanted to give you my thoughts on this movie. So, let's start out with the pros. One thing I really like about this movie, it's kind of weird to see Matthew Broderick in such a early role in his career. He hadn't yet done Ferris Bueller by this point, and he's so young in this movie. It's kind of weird to watch him. I'm not trying to sound weird or anything by saying that. It's just kind of crazy. He's so young in his career, but Matthew Broderick does a really good job. He plays the main character, David, and that's pretty good. Also, you have I think Damie Coleman. I'm probably getting that completely wrong. But the character of Jennifer, she does a pretty good job in the movie, and I think her character was pretty interesting. And the plot itself is really cool. It doesn't really treat its audience like idiots. It has a really compelling plot, basically about this hacker named David who initiates a program using the password Joshua against a very advanced AI computer that kind of generates a whole scenario regarding nuclear war. And that basically it's playing out a game in real time, but none of the actual officials and NORAD and other military installations realize it's a simulation. They think it's the real thing. And it's kind of a crazy, really just a crazy movie. I still think that one of the biggest things about this movie that I have to say in terms of positives is the ending. The ending to this movie is really great. Essentially kind of give you a little bit of a run-by-run play, at least in terms of how I viewed it. Basically, at the end of the movie, the simulation that essentially the computer's playing with everyone else, the Soviets attack first. They strike. And while NORAD Woodbury is about to retaliate with real-life nuclear missiles, the designer of the program, who's like this scientist that was like declared deceased by the government, comes back from hiding, including David and Jennifer, basically convinced him to at least wait out the attack to see if it was real. Turns out, of course, it wasn't real. It was all simulation. And then the computer attempts to, in retaliation, have the U.S. launch strikes. Once again, continuing that war game kind of scenario, right, about nuclear war. It attempts to get the launch codes by circling through thousands of letters and numbers, and eventually David decides to. They initially try to get the computer to play a game and to like make it learn and understand. They eventually get the computer to play a game of tic-tac-toe, and essentially he's playing against himself in basically so many different scenarios, and eventually it's just a draw. He can't exactly win against itself in tic-tac-toe. It becomes a draw. And essentially, right before the missiles are launched, the computer instantly runs thousands of simulations, basically revolving around other countries launching nuclear warheads at each other, the U.S. not launching missiles at Russia or the USSR at this point when this movie came out, and eventually determines that there's no victor, right? This once again is another draw and decides the futility of the game, and eventually the missiles are aborted. And it's one of the most striking and powerful endings I've ever seen to a movie, because it basically gives you the theme that nuclear war, there is like no victor, there's no winner in that kind of scenario. Everyone gets entirely wiped out, and there's just ash, there is dust, there is no life. No one wins in that scenario. And it's a really striking and powerful message, and obviously preaches about the dangers of nuclear warfare. Obviously, it makes sense because this movie was released in the 80s, but even today, it's still a really powerful message in the way that it's shown by the computer running a simulation. And even the AI computer learns at the end the futility of such a scenario and event. It's just insanely great writing and fantastic world, kind of a fantastic theme presented throughout this movie. So I have to really appreciate that. So one of the big positives is one of the greatest things about this movie is the ending. The ending is super striking. I thought the concept itself was also really cool. And like I said before in the beginning of the video, the dangers of AI. They basically replaced, one of the things that they kind of run a scenario, and there's obviously the whole thing with humans when you're about to launch a nuclear missile in America. You got two guys with the keys turning at the same time. They, for whatever reason, the military makes an idiotic decision to replace that decision making by a computer that learns itself, which, like I said, is the computer, the Joshua, like essentially, I think it was called the WAP program, I think. Not exactly sure. It's one of those names, but it's, yeah, WAP. There you go. But yeah, they replace it with that. They give them access. And it's kind of crazy that you would give a AI computer, a learning computer, the ability to launch nuclear warheads by itself, which it essentially does because it believes it's playing a game in a war games kind of scenario. And that's extremely dangerous. Like, typically, there's a lot of military characters in movies you see too are like dumb. They always make stupid decisions. But the general who like yells at things and always tells the scientist and like at the end of the movie says, "Oh yeah, your computer system sucks." I was with them the entire movie because why would you entrust such a dangerous task to a computer? It is quite dangerous. And, we live in a world now with AI, which is approaching everything in workflows. I would hope that in the future, and this, like I said, there's kind of echoes of this theme in like other films like Terminator and stuff, and like I said, the extremely danger future that Skynet was created, which I believe in that world was the same way. Like they gave them all the military resources and access to their weapons to an AI, and that resulted in Judgment Day, if I remember correctly. This is the same thing. Why would they even do this? I would hope in the future no one, gives any kind of an important decision like that to a computer. Because a computer is always going to think, like in this movie, in a simulation, rational, not really irrational, but a, simulated kind of way. So, yeah, I think it also talks about the dangers of AI, obviously the dangers of mutually assured destruction, and just the futility of nuclear war in general. And it's, I think, one of the best movies to show that theme, despite the fact that there's not even killer robots or Skynet and stuff in this movie. It's all really just computer games, but it's really well done in terms of its theme. But yeah, I like the story as well. It has a nice pace to it. I think that the movie is well shot too. There's some great performances throughout. And obviously that ending, man, that ending is fantastic. And the movie, despite its age, just holds up pretty well, I would say. In terms of my cons with this movie, I will say, like I said, the fact that humans gave access and the ability for a learning computer, the ability to launch warheads, is a bit idiotic, but that just adds to the theme, and there wouldn't really be a movie if, that happened. I did like the scenario that they built up in the, before, like, they give the access to the machine, the, kind of misfire that the humans had in a test scenario in the beginning of the movie, which is pretty cool. And I don't know if I'm mistaken, but one of the actors in that sequence was actually from Reservoir Dogs, so that's a little bit of a weird thing to note, but maybe I'm wrong there. But in terms of my other cons, I do think this whole movie is, like I said, I do like David's character, Matthew Broderick's character. I do find it fascinating, though, once he gets that back door into the the warp computer, and gets access to the program and sees all the games, he immediately chooses the nuclear war option. And I find that really strange. I feel like that was a really idiotic decision of him to do. I mean, I get he's a teenager, he's a hacker, he probably saw that and thought, maybe, this is a really cool combat game. But at the same time, I don't know, maybe that's just me. I wouldn't pick like the first option if I got access and hacked into a computer company and see all their games to try out. And I'm like, let's try out the nuclear war game. I probably wouldn't do that. I probably would do another game that has a different title and sounds more appealing. That's the only thing about this movie. I feel like it was a little bit dumb. I was like, this whole movie, once again, wouldn't have happened if he just didn't select that program, that game to play, so to speak. That to me, But like I said before, he was a teenager, and there wouldn't really be a movie without it. But yeah, that part of the movie I was like, okay, that's a really dumb character decision to make. But yeah. But that's really my real huge issue with this movie. I think it's pretty well done. I think the ending's very striking, despite some small flaws with the narrative here and there. It's a pretty solid movie. Also, one more comment I forgot to mention. David and Jennifer's relationship. Now, it's that typical thing in 80s movies where the two of them got to get together romantically. I thought that it was a little bit forced. To me, Jennifer seemed really open and like, I don't know how to explain it. I think like, I don't know, just like willing or something to David, and it just kind of connected. I think that was okay, but I do think that the relationship could have been built a little bit better in the story. But yeah, other than that, those are mostly my cons. I still think this is a really solid 80s movie, one of the best endings I've ever seen to any kind of movie. Really solid, teaches you about a lot of things, the dangers of mad computers, the dangers of AI. It's a really solid 80s movie, and I highly recommend it. So yeah, hopefully you all have a good day. This is my review of War Games. Peace, y'all.